The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval training facility as Sarah Mitchell walked through the main gates for her first day as a civilian contractor. At 32 years old, she had spent the last decade of her life doing things most people only saw in movies. But today, she was trying something different. After serving 8 years as a Navy SEAL, she had decided to step back from active duty and take a consulting position, training new recruits in advanced combat tactics. Sarah looked like someone you might pass on the street without a second glance. She stood at 5 feet 6 inches tall with an athletic, but not overly muscular build. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore plain civilian clothes consisting of dark jeans and a gray jacket. She had learned long ago that blending in was often more valuable than standing out. Her face carried a quiet confidence, but nothing about her appearance screamed military, let alone special operations. The training facility buzzed with activity as hundreds of young recruits moved between buildings. Most of them were fresh out of boot camp, eager and full of energy. They walked in groups, laughing and joking, their voices echoing off the concrete walls. Sarah observed them with the practiced eye of someone who had seen countless recruits come and go. She knew that most of them had dreams of glory, of becoming heroes. Very few understood the reality of what military service truly demanded. As she made her way to the administration building, Sarah noticed the usual dynamics at play. The larger, more athletic recruits naturally positioned themselves as leaders of their groups. They walked with swagger, their voices louder than the others. The quieter ones hung back, watching and learning. Sarah had seen this pattern repeat itself hundreds of times. Physical presence often translated to social dominance in military training environments. At least in the beginning, inside the administration building, Sarah met with Commander Roberts, a stern-faced man in his 50s who ran the training program. He sat behind a heavy wooden desk, covered with papers and files. The walls of his office displayed decades of naval history through photographs and commendations. Commander Roberts stood when she entered and extended his hand. "Ms. Mitchell, welcome aboard," he said with a firm handshake. "We're glad to have someone with your background helping with our program." Sarah nodded politely. "Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to it." The commander gestured for her to sit and began explaining her role. She would be observing training sessions for the first week, getting a feel for the current crop of recruits and identifying areas where the program could be improved. After that, she would begin implementing new training modules focused on mental resilience and tactical thinking. The commander made it clear that he wanted her expertise, but also wanted her to maintain a low profile. "We haven't advertised your background to the recruits," Commander Roberts explained. "We find that sometimes, when they know they're being trained by someone with your level of experience, they either become overly nervous or try too hard to impress. We want authentic observations of how they perform naturally." Sarah understood completely. "That works for me, sir. I prefer to stay under the radar anyway." After the meeting, Sarah was given a badge identifying her simply as a civilian contractor and consultant. No rank, no service branch, no details. She was assigned a small office in one of the auxiliary buildings and given access to training schedules and recruit files. The rest of her first day was spent reviewing personnel records and getting familiar with the facility layout. The naval training base was massive, covering hundreds of acres. It included obstacle courses, shooting ranges, classroom buildings, barracks, dining facilities, and specialized training areas for everything from water survival to hand-to-hand combat. Sarah walked the grounds that afternoon, reacquainting herself with the environment. Though she had trained at different facilities during her SEAL career, they all shared certain characteristics. The smell of gun oil and sweat, the sound of drill instructors shouting commands, the sight of young men and women pushing their bodies to the limit. As evening approached, Sarah decided to grab dinner at the main dining facility before heading back to her temporary housing. The cafeteria was large and industrial, designed to feed hundreds of people efficiently. Long tables filled the space, and recruits lined up at multiple food stations. The noise level was considerable. With dozens of conversations happening simultaneously, Sarah went through the line, selecting a simple meal of grilled chicken, vegetables, and rice. She paid little attention to the people around her, her mind already processing the information she had absorbed throughout the day. She was thinking about training protocols and how she might introduce new elements that would better prepare these recruits for the psychological demands of combat. With her tray in hand, Sarah scanned the dining hall for a place to sit. Most tables were full of recruits in their workout uniforms, clustered in their social groups. She spotted an empty table near the back corner of the facility, away from the main flow of traffic. It was perfect. She could eat in peace and continue observing the group dynamics without drawing attention to herself. Sarah set her tray down and took a seat facing the wall, her back to most of the dining hall. It was a deliberately non-tactical position, something she never would have done in a hostile environment, but this was a safe space. She was off duty, just another civilian contractor trying to eat her dinner. She pulled out her phone and began reviewing some notes she had taken earlier. She had been eating for, perhaps, 5 minutes when she sensed a change in the atmosphere around her. It was subtle at first, a shift in the ambient noise level, a sense of focused attention moving in her direction. Sarah had spent years developing situational awareness to a fine art, even without looking up. She could tell that multiple people were approaching her table with purpose. 4 figures moved into her peripheral vision and surrounded her table. Sarah looked up slowly from her phone. 4 young men stood around her, all in their early 20s, all wearing the standard-issue workout gear of trainees. They were large, physically imposing individuals who clearly spent significant time in the gym. The one directly in front of her stood well over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and arms that strained against his shirt sleeves. "This is our table," the tall one said. His name tag read Dawson. His tone was casual but carried an edge of challenge. The 3 others with him spread out slightly, forming a loose semicircle. Their body language was deliberately intimidating. Classic dominance display. Sarah set her phone down and looked up at Dawson with a calm, neutral expression. She took in all 4 of them in a single glance, automatically cataloging details. Dawson was the obvious leader. To his right stood a shorter but heavily muscled recruit named Martinez. On the left were 2 others, Jensen and Cole, both athletic and confident. They all wore the same expression, a mixture of amusement and expectation. "I didn't see any names on it," Sarah replied evenly. She kept her voice neutral, neither aggressive nor submissive. "The dining hall seems pretty full. There are plenty of other seats available." Dawson smirked and glanced at his friends. "Yeah, but we always sit here. It's kind of a tradition. So maybe you could move somewhere else." Sarah took a deliberate bite of her chicken and chewed slowly before responding. She had dealt with this type of behavior countless times, though usually in different contexts. These young men were testing boundaries, establishing pecking order. It was instinctive behavior, especially in military environments where hierarchy and dominance were constant factors. "I'm already eating," Sarah said simply. "I'll be done in about 10 minutes. You're welcome to wait, or you can choose one of the other empty tables I saw on the way in." The 4 trainees exchanged glances. They clearly hadn't expected resistance, especially not calm. Matter-of-fact resistance from a woman who looked completely unintimidated by their presence. Martinez stepped forward slightly. "Look, lady, we don't want any trouble. We're just asking nicely for you to move. This is our spot." Sarah took a sip of water and set the glass down carefully. "And I'm declining nicely. I got here first. That's generally how seating works." The tension at the table was beginning to attract attention from nearby recruits. Conversations at adjacent tables quieted as people turned to watch what was developing. Sarah noticed this in her peripheral awareness, but kept her focus on the 4 men around her. She recognized the type. They were probably decent kids, athletic and competitive, used to physical dominance translating to social control. They weren't truly dangerous, just immature and operating on instinct. Dawson's expression hardened slightly. He put both hands on the table and leaned forward, using his height and size to loom over Sarah. It was a classic intimidation tactic. Invading personal space and using physical presence to create psychological pressure. "Let me explain this in simple terms," Dawson said, his voice dropping lower. "We're training to be warriors. We're going to be out there defending people like you. This table is where we sit, where we talk about our training, where we bond as a unit. It's important to us. You're just some civilian contractor. So why don't you show a little respect and find somewhere else to sit?" Sarah looked up at him for a long moment. Her expression remained completely calm, almost serene. She had stared down armed insurgents, made split-second life-or-death decisions under fire, and operated in some of the most hostile environments on Earth. For overconfident trainees in a dining hall didn't even register on her threat assessment scale. "I'm going to give you all some free advice," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness. "In the real world, outside of this training facility, the most dangerous people don't announce themselves. They don't puff up their chests or make demands or try to intimidate others in dining halls. The truly dangerous people are the ones who stay calm, who observe, who understand that physical size and aggression are often signs of insecurity rather than strength." Martinez laughed. "Oh, we got a philosopher here. That's cute. Maybe you can write that wisdom down and share it at your office job or whatever." The other two, Jensen and Cole, grinned. The situation was attracting more attention now. At least 20 other recruits were openly watching, and Sarah could see some of them pulling out their phones. In the modern military, everything was documented and shared. She suspected this encounter would be circulating on social media within minutes, regardless of how it ended. Sarah stood up slowly. At her full height, she was still several inches shorter than Dawson and considerably smaller than all four of the men surrounding her. But something in the way she moved made them instinctively take a small step back. It was nothing obvious, no aggressive posturing or threatening gestures. It was simply the movement of someone completely comfortable with physical confrontation. Someone who carried themselves with absolute confidence. "Here's what's going to happen," Sarah said calmly. "I'm going to finish my dinner. You four are going to find another table. Then we're all going to go about our evening. Tomorrow, we'll pretend this never happened, and you'll have learned a valuable lesson about making assumptions." Dawson's face flushed red. He clearly felt challenged in front of his friends and the growing audience of onlookers. And what if we don't? What if we decide we're done asking nicely? Sarah tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. Then you'll be making a mistake that will follow you for the rest of your military careers. Trust me on that. The four trainees stood there, clearly uncertain about what to do next. They had expected easy compliance or perhaps an argument they could escalate. Instead, they had encountered something they didn't quite understand. Sarah's complete lack of fear or deference confused them. Jensen, one of the quieter members of the group, spoke up. "Look, maybe we should just let it go. Find another table." But Dawson wasn't ready to back down, not with everyone watching. His pride was on the line now. "No way," we asked politely. "She's being disrespectful to future naval officers." Sarah almost smiled at that. Future officers? These young men had no idea what lay ahead of them. How many would wash out before completing their training? How few would actually see combat? How even fewer would face the kind of situations that truly tested a person's character? "Final offer," Dawson said, straightening up to his full height. "Move now, or we'll move you." The dining hall had gone significantly quieter. More people were watching now, and Sarah could see some recruits starting to stand, unsure whether they should intervene. She also noticed in her peripheral vision one of the dining facility staff members was hurrying toward the duty officer's station. This situation was seconds away from becoming an official incident. Sarah took a deep breath and made a decision. She could continue to resist, let this escalate, and end up in Commander Roberts' office explaining why she was involved in an altercation on her first day. Or she could use this as a teaching moment, though not in the way anyone present might expect. "Tell you what," Sarah said, her voice still calm. "I'll make you a deal. Answer one question correctly, and I'll move. Get it wrong, and you find another table. Fair?" Dawson glanced at his friends, then back at Sarah. He was clearly trying to figure out if this was some kind of trap. But his ego wouldn't let him refuse what seemed like an easy out. "Fine, what's the question?" Sarah picked up her water glass and took a casual sip before asking, "What? In a real combat situation, what's the most important factor in determining whether someone is a threat?" The four trainees looked at each other. Martinez jumped in first. "Size and strength. The bigger and stronger you are, the more dangerous you are. Sarah shook her head. Wrong. Jensen tried next. Weapons. The person with the better weapons is more dangerous? Also wrong, Sarah replied. Cole offered training. The person with better training is the threat. Getting warmer, but still not quite right, Sarah said. Dawson crossed his arms. Then what? What's your answer? Intent, Sarah said simply. The most dangerous person in any situation is the one who has already decided what they're willing to do. Size, strength, weapons, training, they all matter. But none of them mean anything compared to someone who has made peace with the consequences of their actions and committed fully to a course of action. That's what makes someone truly dangerous. The 4 trainees stood there, processing this. Before any of them could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? Everyone turned to see Commander Roberts striding across the dining hall, his expression stern. Behind him walked Master Chief Garrison, a weathered veteran with a crew cut and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. The room went from quiet to absolutely silent. Recruits at nearby tables sat up straighter. Even Dawson and his friends immediately shifted their posture to something more respectful. Commander. Robert stopped at the table and looked around at the scene. His eyes moved from the 4 trainees to Sarah, then to the crowd of onlookers with their phones out. I asked if there was a problem, the commander repeated, his voice carrying authority that made the earlier confrontation seem like children playing. Dawson spoke up first. No, sir, no problem. We were just having a discussion about seating arrangements. Commander Roberts turned his gaze to Sarah. Ms. Mitchell, anything you need to report? Sarah met his eyes and saw the calculation happening there. He was giving her an out, a chance to make this official. But she also saw the warning, the reminder that he wanted her to maintain a low profile. She made her decision. No, sir. Just a misunderstanding. We were actually having an interesting conversation about threat assessment. The commander studied her face for a moment, then nodded slowly. I see Dawson, Martinez, Jensen, Cole. I believe there are empty tables on the other side of the dining facility. I suggest you find your seats and finish your dinner. Yes, sir, all 4 said in unison. They moved away quickly, grateful to escape without further consequences. As they walked across the dining hall, Sarah could see them talking among themselves, gesturing, probably trying to make sense of what had just happened. Commander Roberts waited until they were out of earshot, before speaking to Sarah in a lower voice. My office, 7 a.m. tomorrow. Yes, sir, Sarah replied. The commander and Master Chief Garrison walked away, and gradually the normal noise level of the dining hall resumed. Sarah sat back down and returned to her meal, though she had lost most of her appetite. She could feel eyes on her from various tables, could hear whispered conversations and see people showing their phone screens to each other as she was finishing her food. An older recruit, probably in his late 20s, approached her table. Unlike the earlier group, he came alone and his body language was respectful. His name tag read Patterson. Ma'am, I just wanted to say that was impressive, Patterson said quietly. The way you handled that situation. Most people would have either backed down or made it worse. Sarah looked up at him. Thank you, but it really wasn't that impressive. Just basic conflict escalation. Patterson shook his head. With respect, ma'am, it was more than that. I've been in the military for 6 years before coming here for advanced training. I've seen a lot of confrontations. You had complete control of that situation from start to finish. The way you carried yourself, the things you said about intent and true danger, that's not civilian contractor talk. That's operator talk. Regarded him carefully. Patterson was clearly more experienced than the average recruit, and he was observant. She chose her words carefully. I've had some training in conflict management. Comes with certain job backgrounds. Patterson nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. Right. Well, I just wanted to say respect, and maybe warn you that Dawson and his crew, they're not going to let this go. They got embarrassed in front of everyone. They'll be looking for a way to save face. I appreciate the heads up, Sarah said. After Patterson left, Sarah finished her meal quickly and disposed of her tray. As she walked out of the dining facility, she pulled out her phone and sent a brief text to her former team leader, a SEAL commander she still kept in touch with. She explained the situation and asked for advice on how to handle things moving forward. His response came back quickly with just 3 words followed by a laughing emoji. The walk back to her temporary quarters gave Sarah time to reflect on her first day. It hadn't gone quite as planned. She had wanted to observe quietly, to get a feel for the environment without causing ripples. Instead, she had ended up in a confrontation that was probably already being discussed in every barracks on base. By morning, everyone would know about the civilian contractor who had faced down 4 large trainees without backing down. Her temporary housing was a small apartment in the civilian contractor quarters, separate from the recruit barracks, but still on base. It was sparse, but functional, containing a bed, desk, small kitchen area, and bathroom. Sarah dropped her bag on the desk and sat down heavily on the bed. She thought about calling her sister, maybe explaining what happened, but decided against it. Her family still didn't fully understand what her years as a SEAL had been like, and she wasn't sure she wanted to try to explain this situation. Instead, she pulled out her laptop and began reviewing the files Commander Roberts had given her. The 4 trainees from the dining hall were all in the same training cohort, which wasn't surprising given how they moved as a unit. Their files made for interesting reading. Dawson, the tall one who seemed to be the leader, came from a military family. His father and grandfather had both been Navy officers. His physical test scores were excellent, near the top of his class. His academic scores were average, and his psychological evaluation noted a tendency toward overconfidence and competitiveness. The evaluator had written that Dawson needed to learn humility before he could become an effective leader. Martinez had a background in college football before joining the Navy. He was strong and athletic, with good scores across the board. His evaluation mentioned difficulty accepting criticism and a tendency to follow stronger personalities rather than thinking independently. Jensen was the most academically gifted of the 4, with high scores in tactical thinking and problem-solving. However, his evaluation noted that he often deferred to others in social situations and needed to develop more confidence in his own judgment. Cole was the wild card. His file showed varied scores, sometimes excellent and sometimes mediocre. The pattern suggested inconsistency and lack of focus. His evaluator had written that Cole had significant potential, but needed to find motivation and direction. Sarah made notes on each of them. She could see the group dynamics clearly now. Dawson was the alpha, using his size and family background to dominate. Martinez was the enforcer, following Dawson's lead and adding muscle to support whatever Dawson decided. Jensen was the brains who subordinated his intelligence to maintain group membership. Cole was along for the ride, finding identity in association with the stronger personalities. It was a common pattern, one Sarah had seen in various forms throughout her military career. These types of groups could be functional in certain contexts, but they often developed unhealthy dynamics if left unchecked. The strongest personality wasn't always the best leader. Group team could override individual judgment in critical moments. As Sarah continued reviewing files, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Commander Roberts, brief and to the point. The message made Sarah smile despite herself. The commander clearly had a sense of humor about the situation, even if he was going to dress her down in the morning. She typed a quick reply confirming she would be there, then returned to her work. The next few hours passed quickly as Sarah immersed herself in recruit files and training protocols. She made extensive notes about potential improvements to the program, areas where psychological resilience training could be enhanced, scenarios that could better prepare recruits for the mental challenges of actual combat operations. It was close to midnight when she finally closed her laptop and got ready for bed. As she lay in the dark, Sarah thought about the path that had led her here. Growing up, she had never imagined becoming a Navy SEAL. Women weren't even allowed in the program till 2016, well into her adult life. But once the doors opened, she had been determined to prove she could meet the standards. The training had been brutal, pushing her beyond limits she didn't know she had. The failure rate was astronomical. Most candidates, male or female, washed out. But Sarah had made it through. She had earned her trident, the SEAL insignia that represented one of the most exclusive fraternities in the military. She had deployed multiple times, operated in hostile territories, done things she could never talk about publicly. She had saved lives and taken lives. She had seen friends wounded and killed. She had learned what she was truly capable of when everything was on the line. After 8 years, though, something had shifted. The constant deployments, the stress, the secrecy, it all began to wear on her. She had started to think about what came next, what life looked like after the teams. When the opportunity came to consult on training programs, helping to shape the next generation of warriors, it had seemed like a natural transition, a way to use her experience and skills without the operational tempo that had defined her life for so long. Now lying in an unfamiliar bed after her first day in this new role, Sarah wondered if she had made the right choice. Part of her missed the intensity of operational life, the clarity of purpose that came with having a specific mission. This consulting role was more ambiguous, more political, more complicated in ways that had nothing to do with physical danger. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Master Chief Garrison, who apparently had gotten her number from Commander Roberts. Sarah read the message and found herself smiling in the darkness. She typed back a simple acknowledgement and set her phone aside. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. She closed her eyes and fell asleep with the ease of someone who had learned to rest whenever the opportunity presented itself, a skill ingrained from years of military service. The next morning, Sarah arrived at Commander Roberts' office at exactly 7 a.m. She wore similar civilian clothes to the previous day, practical and understated. Master Chief Garrison was already there, standing near the window with a coffee mug in his hand. Commander Roberts sat behind his desk, reviewing a tablet. "Close the door and have a seat." "Ms. Mitchell," the commander said. Without looking up, Sarah did as instructed, settling into one of the chairs facing the desk. The office was quiet, except for the faint sound of early morning activity filtering in from outside. She waited patiently, her hands folded in her lap, her expression neutral. Years of military discipline had taught her the value of silence. Commander Roberts finally set down his tablet and looked directly at her. "So, your first day. How do you think it went?" "It had some unexpected elements, sir," Sarah replied honestly. The commander nodded. "That's one way to put it. Master Chief Garrison and I watched the security footage from the dining hall last night. All of it. Want to know what we saw?" "Yes, sir." Master Chief Garrison moved away from the window and leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. He spoke in a gravelly voice that suggested years of shouting commands on training fields. "We saw 4 overconfident recruits trying to bully someone they perceived as weak. We saw that person handle the situation with remarkable restraint and control. We also saw that person make a tactical decision to defuse rather than escalate, even when escalation would have been justified." Commander Roberts continued. "We also saw roughly 50 recruits recording the whole thing on their phones. By breakfast this morning, the video had spread to every unit on base. Do you know what they're calling you?" Sarah shook her head. "No, sir." The ghost Master Chief Garrison said, with something that might have been amusement in his voice. "Because you appeared out of nowhere, faced down 4 large trainees without apparent concern, and then disappeared back into the shadows. The rumor mill is working overtime, trying to figure out who you are and what your background is." Commander Roberts leaned back in his chair. "This presents us with a problem, Ms. Mitchell. We wanted you to observe quietly and make recommendations. Instead, you've become a topic of intense speculation and interest among the recruits. Your cover, such as it was, is compromised." "I understand, sir. I apologize for the situation." "Don't," the commander said, raising a hand. "You handled it correctly given the circumstances. If you had backed down, those 4 would have learned the wrong lesson. If you had been aggressive, it could have become a physical altercation. You threaded the needle. But now we need to decide how to proceed." Master Chief Garrison spoke up. "We've got a few options. We could remove you from the program, send you to a different facility where you could start fresh. We could reveal your background to the recruits and use you as an instructor rather than an observer. Or we could continue as planned and let the speculation run its course while you do your job." Sarah considered the options carefully. "What do you recommend, sir?" Commander Roberts exchanged a glance with Master Chief Garrison. honestly. I think we should tell them. Not everything, but enough. These recruits are going to find out eventually anyway. The military isn't that big a community, especially at the special operations level. Someone will recognize your name or look you up. Better to control the narrative than let rumors fill in the gaps. With respect, sir, won't that change how they interact with me? If they know I was a SEAL, they might not behave naturally during observations. True, Master Chief Garrison acknowledged. But you're not exactly in stealth mode anymore. The dining hall incident saw to that. At least if they know who you are, they'll understand why you didn't back down. It provides context. The commander stood and walked to his window. Looking out over the training grounds where early morning physical training was already underway, here's what I'm thinking. We have the quarterly assembly this Friday. All recruits, all instructors, all support staff. I make announcements, address any issues, that sort of thing. I'll introduce you there, mention your background in special operations consulting, acknowledge that you're here to evaluate and improve our training program. I won't go into specifics about your service record, but I'll make it clear you're qualified and should be respected. That seems reasonable, sir, Sarah agreed. In the meantime, Master Chief Garrison added, you continue your observations as planned, but be aware that people will be watching you more closely now. Some will be curious. Some will be skeptical. And some, like our 4 friends from last night, will be looking for a chance to prove themselves against you. Sarah nodded. Understood, Master Chief. Commander Roberts returned to his desk. One more thing. Dawson and his group. They've been spoken to this morning about their behavior. Nothing official on their records, but they've been warned about attempting to intimidate others. However, Patterson was right when he told you they won't let this go. Young men with bruised egos can be unpredictable. Keep your situational awareness up. Always do, sir, Sarah replied. The meeting concluded, and Sarah left the office feeling both relieved and concerned. Relieved that she wasn't being removed from the program, concerned about the increased scrutiny that would now accompany her work. She had always preferred operating in the shadows, being the quiet professional who got the job done without fanfare. Now she was the ghost, a mysterious figure that everyone wanted to figure out. The rest of the day was spent observing various training activities. Sarah watched hand-to-hand combat drills, where recruits practiced basic strikes and defensive maneuvers. She observed obstacle course runs, noting which recruits pushed through fatigue and which ones gave up when things got difficult. She sat in on classroom sessions about naval history and military law. Throughout it all, she was acutely aware of the attention she received. Recruits would glance at her when they thought she wasn't looking. Instructors introduced themselves and made small talk, clearly curious about her background. Even the support staff seemed interested in the civilian contractor who had become the subject of so much gossip. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor, friendly but not overly familiar, observant but not judgmental. By lunchtime, Sarah decided to eat at her office rather than return to the dining facility. She wasn't avoiding confrontation, but there was no point in creating another spectacle. She had brought a packed lunch from home, and she ate while reviewing her morning notes and comparing them to the training standards outlined in the program documents. Around 2 p.m., there was a knock on her office door. Sarah looked up to find Patterson, the older recruit who had approached her the previous evening, standing in the doorway. "Ma'am, sorry to bother you. I was hoping I could speak with you for a moment." "Come in," Sarah said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "What's on your mind?" Patterson entered and closed the door behind him. He sat down and seemed to gather his thoughts before speaking. "I wanted to apologize for what happened last night. Those guys, Dawson and the others, they don't represent the rest of us. Most of the recruits here are good people who are serious about their training. I appreciate that, but you don't need to apologize for someone else's behavior. And I don't judge an entire group based on the actions of a few individuals." "I know, ma'am. But still, I wanted you to know. Also, there's something else. Word has gotten around about who you might be. Some of the guys have been doing research, trying to figure out your background. They found some old news articles about women completing SEAL training. Your name came up." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "Did it now?" Patterson nodded. "Look, I don't know if it's true or not, and I'm not asking you to confirm or deny anything. but I wanted to warn you that Dawson is taking this personally. He's been talking about how he's going to prove that size and strength matter more than whatever you think matters. He's planning something. Planning what, specifically? I'm not sure exactly, but I know he's been talking to some of the other athletic recruits. The ones who were college wrestlers or martial artists before joining. He's setting up some kind of challenge. I think he wants to embarrass you somehow, prove that you got lucky last night. Sarah considered this information. It wasn't surprising, but it was concerning. Dawson was letting his ego override his judgment, and that could lead to situations that would hurt his career and potentially disrupt the training program. Patterson, I appreciate you coming to me with this. Can I ask why you're telling me? You're a recruit in the same cohort as Dawson. Warning me could put you at odds with your peers. Patterson met her eyes steadily. Because I've been in the military long enough to recognize when someone knows what they're doing? Whatever your background is, ma'am, you carry yourself like someone who has seen real action. Dawson is playing games. He thinks military training is about being the toughest guy in the room. But you and I both know it's about something deeper than that. I'd rather be loyal to the truth than to guys like Dawson. Sarah felt a measure of respect for the young man sitting across from her. He had the maturity and judgment that came from actual experience, not just physical conditioning and youthful confidence. Thank you, Patterson. I'll keep an eye out. In the meantime, focus on your own training. Don't let the drama distract you from why you're here. After Patterson left, Sarah sat thinking about the situation. She had hoped to avoid exactly this kind of personal conflict, but it seemed unavoidable now. Dawson felt challenged and needed to reassert his dominance. It was a predictable pattern, one that played out in military training environments regularly. The question was how to handle it in a way that would be educational rather than destructive. The rest of the afternoon passed uneventfully. Sarah continued her observations, making detailed notes about training methodologies and recruit performance. She identified several areas where improvements could be made, particularly in teaching recruits how to think critically under pressure, rather than just following orders by rote. As evening approached, Sarah returned to her quarters and changed into workout clothes. One of the benefits of being on a military base was access to excellent fitness facilities. She headed to the gym, planning to get in a workout before dinner. Physical fitness had been a cornerstone of her life for so long that it felt wrong to skip even a single day. The base gym was well-equipped and relatively quiet at this hour. Most recruits were at dinner or resting after a long day of training. Sarah moved through her routine with practiced efficiency. She started with a run on the treadmill, then moved to strength training. She wasn't trying to build massive muscles, but rather maintain the functional strength and endurance that had served her so well in her SEAL career. She was in the middle of pull-ups when she noticed a group entering the gym. It was Dawson and his 3 friends, along with several other athletic-looking recruits she didn't recognize. They were talking loudly, their voices echoing in the gym space. Sarah continued her pull-ups, counting silently in her head. But her awareness tracked the group's movement. The group made their way toward the section where Sarah was working out. It wasn't coincidental. They were deliberately approaching her area. Their body language suggested this was the planned confrontation Patterson had warned her about. Sarah finished her set of pull-ups and dropped down from the bar. Taking a moment to wipe her hands on her towel, Dawson stepped forward, a confident smile on his face. He had clearly gathered support for whatever he was about to propose, with at least 8 other recruits standing behind him. The gym had several other people scattered around, and Sarah noticed them starting to pay attention to what was developing. "Hey, Ms. Mitchell," Dawson said, his tone friendly, but with an underlying edge. "Glad we ran into you. We were just talking about what you said last night about intent being more important than size or strength or training. Some of us have been thinking about that, and we're curious to test the theory." Sarah crossed her arms and looked at the assembled group. "Test it how?" Martinez stepped forward. "We were thinking a friendly competition. Nothing serious, just some basic physical challenges. You know, to see if what you said holds up in practice. If intent really matters more than physical capability." Sarah understood immediately what was happening. This was a trap designed to embarrass her. If she declined, they would claim she was all talk and no substance. If she accepted and lost, they would use it to undermine her credibility. If she accepted and won, they would claim the challenges weren't fair or she got lucky. It was a no-win scenario, but Sarah had spent years operating in no-win scenarios and finding ways to turn them to her advantage. "What kind of challenges are you proposing?" she asked calmly. Jensen, the smart one, spoke up. "We figured 3 events. First, a strength test. We've got a rope climb over there and we'll time how fast you can do it compared to a few of us. Second, an agility course using the obstacles outside. Third, a sparring match, just light contact. No actual fighting, just to see who has better technique." Sarah nodded slowly, as if considering the proposal. In reality, she was calculating angles, assessing the situation, and making a decision about how to handle this. The smart move would be to decline politely and walk away. Let Commander Roberts handle it through official channels. But Sarah had never been one to take the smart, safe path when an opportunity for a teaching moment presented itself. "I have a counterproposal," Sarah said. "I'll participate in your challenges, but we adjust the parameters. Instead of competing against you, I compete against myself. You set the standards, and I'll either meet them or I won't. That way it's not about me versus you. It's about whether I can back up what I said about capability versus intent." The group exchanged glances. This wasn't quite what they had planned, but it was close enough. Dawson nodded. "Okay, that works. So what are the standards? We need to set benchmarks." One of the other recruits, a muscular young man Sarah didn't recognize, stepped forward. "For the rope climb, if you can do it in under 15 seconds, that's passing. That's the time most of us can hit. For the agility course, under 2 minutes. And for sparring, you'd need to last 3 minutes without getting taken down or tagged more than 5 times. Sarah noted that these were all reasonable standards. Not impossible, but challenging. They were giving themselves enough room to win the propaganda war regardless of outcome. If she failed any of the tests, they could claim victory. If she passed barely, they could dismiss it as luck. If she passed easily, well, they probably weren't expecting that. "All right," Sarah agreed. "Let's do this. But one condition. After we finish, regardless of the outcome, we sit down and have a conversation about what just happened and what it means." Deal. Dawson looked confused by this addition, but shrugged. "Sure, whatever. Let's start with the rope climb." The group moved to the rope climbing area, and several other gym-goers followed. Sensing something interesting was about to happen, someone had already pulled out their phone to record. Sarah noticed this, but said nothing. If this was going to become another viral moment, at least she would make sure it was educational. The rope hung from a 20-foot ceiling, thick and rough. Sarah had climbed countless ropes during her training and deployments. She stepped up to it, gripped it firmly, and looked at Dawson. "Ready when you are." Dawson held up his phone, using the stopwatch function. "On your mark, set, go." Sarah attacked the rope with smooth, efficient movements. Her technique was textbook perfect, using her legs to clamp and her arms to pull in a coordinated rhythm. She had learned early in SEAL training that rope climbing wasn't about strength alone, but about full-body coordination and technique. Her smaller size was actually an advantage here, requiring less energy to pull her body weight upward. She reached the top in 9 seconds, rang the bell that hung there, and descended in a controlled slide. When she reached the bottom and let go, Dawson was staring at his phone with a stunned expression. 9.3 seconds, he said quietly. Martinez shook his head. "That's gotta be wrong. Run it again." Sarah shrugged and climbed the rope a second time. This time she finished in 8.7 seconds. The assembled group was silent now, the cocky confidence from moments ago evaporating. Sarah could see them reassessing, their certainty shaken. "Agility course next?" Sarah asked, her tone neutral. They moved outside to an obstacle course set up behind the gym. It included hurdles, a zigzag run through cones, a balance beam, a cargo net climb, and a sprint finish. Sarah walked the course once to familiarize herself with the layout, noting optimal paths and potential trouble spots. 2 minutes is the standard, Jensen reminded her. Sarah nodded and positioned herself at the starting line. This time Martinez held the timer. Ready, go? Sarah moved through the course with a fluidity that came from years of similar training. She vaulted over hurdles without breaking stride, navigated the cones with minimal deceleration, crossed the balance beam with perfect foot placement, and scaled the cargo net like she was walking upstairs. Her movements weren't rushed or frantic. They were controlled and efficient, each action flowing smoothly into the next. She crossed the finish line and Martinez called out, 1 minute 32 seconds. The group of recruits stood in stunned silence. These weren't just passing scores. These were exceptional performances that would rank at the top of their entire training cohort. Sarah walked back toward them, barely breathing hard, her expression still calm and neutral. Cole, who had been quiet throughout, spoke up. How? I mean, you're not even that big. Where does that speed and strength come from? Sarah smiled slightly. That's exactly the point I was trying to make last night. Physical capability isn't just about size. It's about technique, training, experience, and yes, intent. When you know exactly what you need to do, and you've done it thousands of times before, your body moves efficiently. No wasted energy, no hesitation. Dawson's jaw was tight, his face flushed. There's still the sparring. That's different. That's about actual combat ability. Sarah turned to face him. Is it, or is it about the same principles I just demonstrated? Tell you what, instead of sparring, let me show you something more useful. Before anyone could respond, Sarah moved. It wasn't a fast movement, more of a shift in position. But suddenly she was inside Dawson's personal space, her hand resting lightly on his chest. Dawson instinctively stepped back, and Sarah's other hand touched his elbow, guiding his arm into a position where it was slightly extended and vulnerable. In a real fight, size and strength matter, Sarah said quietly, holding the position. But timing and positioning matter more. Right now, if I wanted to, I could control your balance, manipulate your center of gravity, and put you on the ground without using strength at all. It's about leverage and understanding body mechanics. She released him and stepped back. Dawson looked shaken, realizing that for a brief moment she had complete control, and he hadn't even seen it coming. Sarah turned to address the entire group. Here's what I want you all to understand. I'm not here to embarrass you or prove I'm better than you. I'm here because I have experience that can help make you better. What you saw tonight wasn't superhuman ability. It was the result of years of training, countless repetitions, and learning from people who were better than me. Every single one of you can develop these skills if you're willing to put in the work and, more importantly, if you're willing to listen and learn. She paused, letting her words sink in. The reason I didn't back down last night in the dining hall wasn't because I'm tough or brave. It was because I've been in situations that were genuinely life-threatening, where backing down meant people died. A confrontation in a dining hall doesn't even register on that scale. That's what I meant by intent. When you've made real decisions with real consequences, your perspective changes. Jensen raised his hand tentatively as if they were in a classroom. Can you tell us what kind of situations you've been in? What your actual background is? Sarah considered the question. Commander Roberts was going to reveal part of her background at the assembly anyway. Perhaps it was better to control the narrative now on her terms. I served 8 years in Naval Special Operations, Sarah said carefully, choosing her words. I can't talk about specific missions or deployments, but I can tell you that the training was the hardest thing I've ever done. The failure rate is over 75%. Most people who try don't make it. Not because they're weak or cowardly, but because it requires a specific combination of physical capability, mental toughness, and the ability to work as part of a team under extreme stress. Martinez's eyes widened. Wait, are you saying you were a SEAL? Sarah didn't answer directly. I'm saying I've been through training that pushed me beyond what I thought was possible. And the most important thing I learned wasn't about weapons or tactics. It was about self-awareness, knowing my limitations, and never underestimating anyone based on appearances. Dawson had been quiet, processing everything. Now he spoke, and his voice had lost its earlier bravado. You made us look like idiots, Sarah said firmly. You made assumptions, and those assumptions were wrong. That's not the same as being an idiot. That's being inexperienced. The question is whether you learn from this or whether you double down on your original assumptions. Patterson, who had been watching from the edge of the group, stepped forward. "Ma'am, what would you recommend?" "For us, to get better," Sarah thought about the question. "Stop trying to be the toughest person in the room. Start trying to be the most capable. There's a difference. Toughness is about enduring pain and never backing down. Capability is about accomplishing the mission with minimum risk and maximum efficiency. Sometimes that means fighting. Sometimes it means avoiding a fight entirely. Knowing the difference is what separates average soldiers from exceptional ones." She looked at each of them in turn. "You're all here because you want to serve, to be part of something bigger than yourselves. That's admirable. But military service isn't about personal glory or proving you're tough. It's about being reliable, competent, and making good decisions under pressure. Focus on developing those qualities, and the rest will follow." The group was quiet now, really listening. Sarah could see the shift in their body language, the defensive posture giving way to something more open and receptive. This was the teaching moment she had been hoping for, and it had come at a price, but perhaps it would be worth it. "One more thing," Sarah added. "In military operations, ego is a liability. It clouds judgment and leads to bad decisions. Every person in special operations has to check their ego at the door and focus on the mission. The teams work because everyone brings their strengths and covers for each other's weaknesses. No one person is the hero. The team succeeds or fails together." Dawson took a deep breath and stepped forward. He looked uncomfortable but determined. "I owe you an apology. For last night and for setting this up tonight, it was disrespectful, and it was about my pride, not about actually learning anything." Sarah nodded, appreciating the honesty. "Apology accepted, and I respect you for saying that. It takes more courage to admit you were wrong than to double down and defend a mistake." One by one, the other recruits offered their own apologies or expressions of respect. The confrontational atmosphere had completely dissolved, replaced by something closer to mutual understanding. Sarah knew this didn't mean all their problems were solved. Some of them would still struggle with ego and competition. But at least they had seen a different perspective. Perhaps that would make a difference in how they approached their training moving forward. As the group started to disperse, Master Chief Garrison emerged from the gym entrance. He had been watching the whole thing from inside. He walked over to Sarah with his usual stern expression. But there was a glint of something that might have been approval in his eyes. "That was quite a demonstration, Ms. Mitchell," he said quietly. "Had to be done, Master Chief. Better they learn now than in a situation where the stakes are real." "Agreed. Commander Roberts wants to see you tomorrow morning, same time. He's going to want a full report on what happened here." "Understood, Master Chief." Garrison started to walk away, then paused and turned back. "For what it's worth, you handled that well. You could have humiliated them. Instead, you educated them. That's the mark of a good instructor." After everyone had left, Sarah stood alone in the cool evening air, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. She thought about her years as a SEAL, the missions she had run, the teammates she had served with, some of whom hadn't made it home. She thought about why she had chosen this path. Both her original choice to join the SEALs and her recent decision to transition to training and consulting. The truth was, she missed the operational life. She missed the clarity of having a specific mission and the camaraderie of her team. But she didn't miss the constant danger, the deployments that separated her from family, or the weight of decisions made in life-or-death situations. This new path offered the chance to make a difference in a different way, shaping the next generation of warriors and hopefully helping them avoid some of the mistakes she had seen throughout her career. Her phone buzzed with a message from her former team leader, the one she had texted the previous night. He had heard through the military grapevine about both incidents and wanted to check in. Sarah smiled as she read his message, full of his typical dry humor and underlying pride in her accomplishments. She sent back a brief update, assuring him she had things under control. As Sarah walked back to her quarters, she reflected on the unexpected turn her first 2 days had taken. She had gone from wanting to be invisible to becoming the center of attention, from observer to active participant. It wasn't what she had planned, but perhaps it was what was needed. Sometimes the best lessons came from unexpected circumstances, and sometimes the best teaching happened outside formal classrooms and training schedules. The lights were still on in many of the barracks as she passed. She could hear voices and laughter, the sounds of young people building bonds that would sustain them through difficult times ahead. Some of those voices were probably discussing what had happened tonight, spreading the story, adding their own interpretations and embellishments. By morning, it would be all over the base, just like the dining hall incident. But this time, Sarah thought, maybe the story would carry a different message. Not about some mysterious civilian contractor with a hidden background, but about the importance of respect, continuous learning, and keeping your ego in check. If even a few of these recruits took those lessons to heart, then the chaos of the past 2 days would have been worthwhile. She reached her quarters and went inside, already thinking about what she would say to Commander Roberts in the morning. She would write a detailed report, documenting both incidents and explaining her decision-making process. She would recommend that the dining hall confrontation and gym challenge be used as case studies in leadership and conflict resolution training. Turn the negative into a positive, extract the learning value from difficult situations. Before bed, Sarah pulled out a notebook and began writing. She documented everything that had happened, her observations about each recruit involved, and her thoughts on how the training program might be adjusted to address the underlying issues that had led to both confrontations. She filled pages with analysis and recommendations. Drawing on her 8 years of special operations experience and her understanding of human psychology under stress, it was late when she finally closed the notebook and turned off the light. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah's last conscious thought was about intent, the concept she had tried to explain to the recruits. Intent wasn't just about being willing to follow through on a decision. It was about understanding why you were making that decision in the first place, what you hoped to accomplish, and what you were willing to sacrifice to achieve it. She had come to this training facility with the intent to help, to contribute, to make a difference. The path had been messier than expected, but the intent remained clear. And as she had told those young recruits, intent mattered more than size, strength, or even training. Intent was what separated those who succeeded from those who failed, those who made a difference from those who just took up space. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new situations to navigate, new opportunities to teach and learn. But tonight, Sarah Mitchell, former Navy SEAL and current civilian contractor, slept peacefully, confident in her intent and ready for whatever came next. The journey from warrior to teacher was proving more complicated than she had anticipated, but also more meaningful. And in the end, meaning was what mattered most.